It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of June 21st, 1996. We got 5 movies to look at today, so let's go ahead and jump right on into it. And we'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, which was Arnold Schwarzenegger and Vanessa Williams in the action thriller Eraser. Yeah, Eraser is one of those Schwarzenegger movies that's not terrible, but it was one of those films that slowly but surely started the decline for Schwarzenegger. I mean, he was still making some successful movies, but this was one of those ones where this film barely made its budget back here in America. It just crossed $100 million, which was the budget of the film at the time, but it did become a success worldwide, grossing over $242 million. It was essentially a film that in Malaysia, actually, this was actually the highest opening. This is the highest grossing Warner Brothers movie until Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets that is took that over in 2002. But as far as the movie itself goes, it's pretty mediocre, honestly. Like, I don't know about getting the guy who did The Mask to direct this movie. I don't think he's a bad director per se. He's made some really good stuff here, but this just felt like a movie that should have gone to somebody else, like somebody with a more flair for directing stuff like this. Maybe somebody like a Stuart Baird, who had just made his directorial debut with Executive Decision the previous year, this year actually in 1996. But the story itself is nothing really all that engaging. It's essentially you've got John Travolta. My head's all over the place right now. You've got Arnold Schwarzenegger playing a U.S. Marshal protecting Vanessa Williams, is a senior executive at this company who basically took some information from this other company, and basically Schwarzenegger's her bodyguard, kind of, in a way. And I don't know, when I saw this in the stores the first time, I didn't think Vanessa Williams was the right choice for this role. I didn't think she. It's not to say that she's a bad actress or anything, but you're working alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger here, and I don't know. I didn't think at first it would work, but I'll give the movie credit though. Both Schwarzenegger and Williams are perfectly fine in here. They do make a lot of the material here worth it. Some of the action sequences are nicely done, even though some of the visuals in that trailer looked pretty bad. I mean, that crocodile scene, which looks great in the movie, looks absolutely horrible in the trailer. And I thought for a second I saw the stunt woman for Vanessa Williams' character, the wires and all that. But when I watched it again, I realized that it was not that altogether. It was just her. It was just the angle of the camera being in that space in the exact time there. But other than that, though, there's not really a whole lot I really remember about this movie, except for the ending of the film, which I think is the best part of the movie, when Schwarzenegger. Basically, what happens at the end of the movie is that Schwarzenegger and Williams' character fake their deaths. The bad guys think they've won. They're in this limousine that stops at a railroad crossing, and the driver, who was a character that was working with Schwarzenegger and Williams before, and locks the doors, gets out of the vehicle. Schwarzenegger sets this trap. He calls James Caan. It's just like, you've just been erased, and the train hits him and it explodes. Even though that explosion happens is way before the train even hits the car, which it's ridiculously stupid, but I love it at the same time. That's my favorite moment from the entire movie. That's the one thing I remember from this movie a whole lot. Other than that, though, it's not, like I said, it's not a bad movie, but I've seen a lot better from Schwarzenegger. I don't think this is one of his worst movies by any means necessary, but it definitely started the slow decline for Schwarzenegger in the late 90s. Like, his star power was starting to die down a little bit. He would still make some hits here or there, but this was kind of the last one before we got to the real downward spiral of his action movies in the latter half of the decade. But not a bad movie, but just one that I didn't think was all that memorable, honestly, except for a couple of key moments there. Just a mostly forgettable film, honestly, but again, that's my personal opinion on it. But let's take a look at the next movie that came out this weekend, which was arguably the biggest new release that weekend in terms of, excuse me, it was the biggest new release in terms of high expectations, because it was Disney. This is usually the time when they bring out the big guns for their summer animated films. And for this movie in particular, it was a tough sell. It was The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I mean, where do you even begin with a movie like this? For one thing, this is a film that's really hard to sell, especially as a Disney animated feature. The story of the Hunchback of Notre Dame is so dark, it's so completely. There's so many elements in here that it's amazing that they were able to pull this off, which that was a huge thing going into this movie. Nobody really knew what to expect from it. I mean, Disney was still a powerhouse at this point. Even though Pocahontas was not the big hit that Lion King was 2 years prior to this, it still made money. So there was a lot of expectations going into this movie about whether or not they could actually pull this off. So how did they do it? Did they actually do? I meant to say, how did they actually do it? Did they handle it very well, or was this about as bad as you would have thought it would have been? But I'll say this though, I thought they handled it pretty well. Like, for the longest time, I kind of avoided this movie, not for any particular reason. It's just like I never really felt the urge to watch it. But when I finally watched it for the first time, nearly 20 years after the movie came out, I gotta say, man, this movie holds up a lot better than I think most people would have made you think it would have done. Because, man, this is really, really a damn good movie for something that's so controversial, so tough to do. They put their heart and soul into this movie. The animation in this movie is once again so amazing to watch. Not just the scenes of the cathedral and the city, but like the characters alone. Like James Baxter did a lot of the animation for Quasimodo in here, and you could definitely tell that his work is very much prominent in this film. It's Disney doing its best and taking one of the most risky stories you could possibly tell, bringing it to life in such a wonderfully unique way. The visual look of the film is absolutely fantastic, especially towards the end of the film. You could see every single detail of animation they bring in here to give it the menacing tone that the story deserves. The voice acting overall is great as well. Tom Hulce as Quasimodo is amazing in this. You got the late Tony Jay playing Judge Frollo, making for one of Disney's most memorable antagonists. Even people like Demi Moore and Kevin Kline in the movie are very good. They have a lot of good elements to the film. They really are very, very solid characters. The music is amazing. You've got songs by Alan Menken, songs by Stephen Schwartz, and they knock them right out of the park. The opening song, Out There, the opening song is the opening song that you hear in the beginning of the film, and then Quasimodo's song Out There are just songs that are so memorable that you could just listen to the music all the time and just get so sucked in. Like it's just an amazing concept. It's an amazing film that they've toy boat. I'm getting ahead of myself here. It's an amazing achievement that they've been able to pull this off, but there are some problems. There are a lot of things about the movie that don't work. Most notably, the three gargoyles. Despite the fact that God bless Jason Alexander, Charles Kimbrough, and Mary Wicks, they're doing the best they can, but they are just not funny in this movie. They're supposed to be the comic relief of the film, but Jason Alexander can be really hilarious, but the movie fails to make him funny, and that's really one of the biggest crimes of the movie. Is if you can't make Jason Alexander funny in a movie, then you've completely missed the mark altogether. The film even tries to make it seem like they're a part of Quasimodo's thoughts, and not really, which would have been more enjoyable. But no, at the end of in the climax, they're fighting alongside Quasimodo, and it's just like, what's going on here? Are these things actually real or what? It's just like, I mean, it would have made more sense to have them not really exist, and maybe that's the idea. Maybe that's a progression of the character. But man, the way they handle it here, it really is one of the huge flaws of the film. One of the other problems I think it has is that, as much as I commend the movie for the darker tone, there are too many moments that are very cliched riddle, been there, done that type of stuff, mainly focusing around the gargoyles and the characters played by Demi Moore and Kevin Kline. It kind of takes you out of the movie solely because it makes it seem like Disney has to keep marketing down to the kids and go for the more silly moments instead of taking the big gambles that they're already taking as it is. I mean, this is a movie that features infanticide, lust, damnation, anti-Ziganism, genocide, and sin. I'm reading this off of Wikipedia, by the way, and I'm just trying to remember what the listings are here, but all those elements are in here, and yet this was still rated G. Like, it's amazing how far we've come in the nearly 30 years since this movie came out to show you what a G-rated movie is back in the day to what it is now. And it's basically nothing because nobody ever wants to do the G rating anymore. So why do you even have it in there? Which, I don't know. Like, that's a whole other subject altogether. But those are just some of the flaws of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. But really, for Disney to actually make an animated kids movie based off of Victor Hugo's one of his darker tales, to make it work for the majority of it, it's a Christmas miracle, man. Like this is stuff that you make movies out of. Like you make documentaries off of how they were able to pull this stuff off. It's amazing that they were able to pull this off as it did. It really does work, and to me, it's probably the last great movie of that Disney Renaissance that happened in the late '80s and early '90s. But it's just such an amazing film. It's a movie that is, I think, is just so well done. And again, and I didn't bring this up. This is also directed by the same guys that did Beauty and the Beast. So maybe that's another element that's brought into why it's such a memorable film, because these are the same guys that made arguably one of the greatest animated movies of all time, one of the greatest movies of all time with Beauty and the Beast. And they bring that over to here. It's just like these guys clearly know what they're doing. I mean, they know their stuff. And what more can I say about it? Hunchback of Notre Dame is such a great film, and I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it already. Do yourself a favor and check it out, man. So that's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Let's go ahead and take a look at our next movie. That is John Sayles' Lone Star. So this is directed by John Sayles. Stars, you see in the trailer there, Chris Cooper, Chris Christopherson, Matthew McConaughey, Elizabeth Pena. And the movie basically focuses on the sheriff's investigation into the murder of one of his predecessors. And it's really one of John Sayles' best movies. I mean, this is a guy that's made a ton of great movies that we've talked about on the show before. Passion Fish, The Secret of Ronan Enish. He also did 8 Man Out. He's been a really solid, underrated director over the years. And this is probably his overall best film ever made. I think it's a really well-made film. It's a great modern Western mystery film. Has a little bit of a Twin Peaks-esque kind of thing going on, except not with the type of David Lynch material that you usually see from him. But it's a very unique film, and it works because of the cast that they had established here. I mean, Chris Cooper, Matthew McConaughey, Chris Christopherson, Frances McDormand's in here, Joe Morton, Elizabeth Pena, Ron Canada, just a really good cast. Clifton James, a strong cast in this film. Is a really good, well-written material here. The 90s had a lot of really good westerns. Looking back now, there are more unique westerns that came out in the 90s than I remember, because of course we had Unforgiven, which was a great film. We had The Quick and the Dead. The Quick and the Dead with the Sam Raimi western from last year. And now we have this movie here, like just so many good westerns that I did not remember existing at this point. And I'm not usually, like I said before, I'm not usually the biggest western type of person, but there's a couple of them I really liked. This is definitely one that really was very impressive to me. I really enjoyed this movie a whole lot. It's John Sayles. He's usually very good with movies like this, but like I said, this is probably his best work that he's done ever. I mean, this is a really fantastic film. I can't recommend this one enough. Lone Star, definitely check it out. So let's go ahead and move on to the next movie that we have here, and that is Sam Rockwell in The Search for One-Eyed Jimmy. So the story centers around this filmmaker who's making a film about his old neighborhood in Brooklyn, and one of the people that he knows in there, One-Eyed Jimmy, goes missing, and Les decides to switch to making a film about him and the people searching. Les in this movie is being played by Holt McCallany, who you may not be familiar with, but you've definitely seen his work before. If you've seen him in Fight Club, he was in Three Kings. He was in a very good underrated FX show called Lights Out that came out back in 2011, which I highly recommend checking that out. I'm pretty sure you can find it on Hulu, but I've never heard of this movie before. It's one of the early... And Sam Rockwell, of course, plays One-Eyed Jimmy, but you also see Steve Buscemi is in here, John Turturro, Nicholas Turturro, Samuel L. Jackson's also in here, Jennifer Beals, Tony Sirico, Michael Badalucco. There's a good cast involved here. Like I said, I've never seen the film before, but with a cast like that, man, the film looks like it actually could be pretty fun. I saw a little bit of the clips from the YouTube that I saw from this. There's no trailer online for this, but it definitely looks like it could be something pretty interesting. Maybe I'll definitely look for it if I can find it somewhere at a good price. But that's pretty much all I know about this one. That's The Search for One-Eyed Jimmy. So let's go ahead and take a look at the last film that we have here, the documentary A Perfect Candidate. So this is a documentary talking about the 1994 U.S. Senate race in Virginia, when you had a matchup between Democratic Senator Chuck Robb and also Republican Oliver North. Now, Oliver North is a name that you should be very familiar with in American history. Oliver North was a veteran of the Vietnam War. He was a National Security Council staff member during the Iran-Contra affair in the 1980s. It involved the illegal sale of weapons to the Khomeini regime of the Islamic Republic of Iran to encourage the release of American hostages that were held in Lebanon. North formulated the second part of the plan, which was to divert proceeds from the arms sales to support the Contra rebel groups in Nicaragua, sales from which were specifically prohibited under the Bullen Amendment. North was essentially granted limited immunity from prosecution in exchange for testifying before Congress about the scheme. He was initially convicted of 3 felony charges, but the convictions were vacated and reversed, and all charges against him were basically dismissed in 1991. And he went, and this movie shows that he unsuccessfully ran for the U.S. Senate. He went on to host a show for Fox News, and then he was elected president of the NRA, and he actually resigned a year later. And I mean, he's a notable figure in American history, and this is a documentary showing kind of why he didn't win, because you saw that little clip there. Like, those are the people that were behind his campaign, and they were not happy with the way that he. As you could tell, they were not happy with whatever was going on in that scene. I haven't seen this film, so I can't really say what it was, but I'm hearing I see a lot of good things about it. I mean, Siskel and Ebert called it the best documentary they've seen since Hoop Dreams, and I really liked Hoop Dreams a lot. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Would this be this probably wouldn't be my favorite movies of all time, but it's definitely an interesting film to take a look at. I mean, it's one of his directors is R.J. Cutler, who did a show on Fox called American High, but he also is most notably known for a couple of documentaries he's done recently. The September issue. He also did the Belushi documentary. He did a Billie Eilish documentary. He did a scripted film called If I Stay with Chloe Moretz. And I mean, this definitely could be something interesting. It could be something very intriguing, but I don't think if I could find it somewhere at a good price, maybe I definitely would check it out. But it's not something I'm going to rush out to see right away. I just wanted to point out that it came out this weekend, and that's a perfect candidate. So on that note, that wraps up another edition of Time About the Movies. When we meet next time, we only have 2 movies to look at. Eddie Murphy starring in The Nutty Professor, and Demi Moore as Striptease. One was a big hit, the other not so much. I think you can pretty much tell which one that was, but we'll delve into those 2 films on our next show, which will be tomorrow. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time, but until then, as always, take care.